Welcome to the Partnering with God in Business podcast. We're so glad you could join us. It's our desire to awaken you to what's possible with God in your business, to align you to who you're called to be, and to activate you in the purpose and power of God in your life and in your business. Hey, welcome back. I'm so excited to have you with us. And a good friend of mine, as well as one of our executive coaches, Kent, is with us. And we're going to be unpacking a number of things today. So make sure you stay tuned as we go throughout this whole journey together. But Kent, can you just give us a little bio about you, what you do, who you are, and
Yeah,
what's your favorite ice cream? No, just kidding. You can share. That's my youth pastor days coming out in front of me.
dark chocolate with peanut butter to answer that
Perfect.
question.
There you go.
And
I'm a vanilla guy.
I add extra scoops of Trader Joe's peanut butter to that. So I go all in on the peanut
You're
butter.
all about peanut butter, man. You're all about peanut. I'm just a simple vanilla guy. I like cookies and cream, but I'm a vanilla guy. I'll just do that and just go for the simple. I'm not a huge chocolate guy, but I do put
I
peanut
do
butter
like
on
a
that too.
vanilla ice cream cone too, especially I know it seems crazy, but McDonald's has the best vanilla ice cream. Their soft serve
Really?
looks great.
I stopped doing that a long time ago. I felt like they just kind of made it really like formula and instead of just this nice, soft, like real ice cream. We have one right around the corner from us that is phenomenal. And I just sometimes on my way to pick up the kids, I'm like, they'll never know. I'll just go get it real quick and get one, eat it, finish it on the way.
Well,
But
welcome to the Partnering with God podcast. We're gonna talk about ice cream today.
that's exactly right. This is how you partner with God and what ice cream you get.
Well, yeah, I'm so glad to be here, Tim. Thanks for inviting me. It's been a joy and pleasure to work with Kingdom Business for over 3 years now. And of course, you and I have known each other for more than 20, I think now. We used to work together back when we were both part of Elam Fellowship and some of that movement in their national youth department. So as far as what I'm up to, what I'm doing, just a brief bio. I recently transitioned in 2023 from a 20-year career in vocational ministry. I was a director of a nonprofit for 5 years in Rochester, New York, a network of college campus ministries. And then we left there around the same time you left for Redding, California, to plant a church in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is, if you're not familiar, is right across the river from downtown Boston, and we were sandwiched right in between Harvard and MIT. So we planted that church, pastored it for 14 years, and then transitioned out of that in 2023. So now I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. I'm executive coaching. I'm doing a lot of writing. I've written a couple books and working on my third, and then doing some speaking as well. So it's just been a joyful time. Honestly, it's felt like this year especially, it's felt like a year of jubilee, just a year of abundance, and God's been really good. So it's been fun.
Well, it's a long awaited one too, because man, when we talk about the year of abundance or we see the breakthrough, it means we've gone through the fire to get there. And I mean, that's sometimes we bypass that sometimes because we're so excited about the breakthroughs and finally the relief. But man, knowing you and walking with you a little bit in your journey, we all go through that valley of just like, God, am I missing it? Where am I at? What are we doing? Do we make the wrong decision? Because I feel like so much often in the church, a lot of times we talk through the breakthroughs and the promises of God, the abundance of heaven, and all these things. But the reality, it's hard at times.
Yeah.
It is hard to hold true to what God has said, to believe what God is going to do, even though we don't see it. And we have prophetic words, we have promises, we have mandates over our lives, and we're like, that did not turn out the way I
Yeah.
thought it was.
Yeah, then how do we deal with that disappointment over something we either felt God said, possibly misinterpreted, or it just wasn't the time for that yet? Like there's a lot, and there's a lot of peaks and valleys in that journey. And just to be honest, back to your point, like, yeah, this has been a year of jubilee, but honestly, it felt like it's not that there was no good things in a long season before that. There were, but it felt like, sometimes it felt like a 20-year wilderness, to be honest with you. So
I
yeah.
was I was gonna bring that up of like, you went to do a church plant and people like, "Oh, you're a pastor, you don't understand business." Planting a church is like starting a business. It's like but you tend to have to go out there in a lot more faith because you trust in God for the provision, which is interesting because I think business leaders need to trust God a lot more in the midst of starting up a company than they do. And I say that to myself included because a lot of times we can depend upon what we know or what we can manufacture on our own. Should a business be profitable? Absolutely. Should we be able to, if we're going to business, should there be a revenue and, ROI and what we're doing and the products or services? Absolutely. We've got to think through that. We should get revenue, but in the same way, we depend on what we can do on our own strength. Then how do I partner with God in the midst of it and not doing out of striving, anxiety, pressure?
Yeah.
But that relates a lot to what you did with a church plan of you moved out, you obeyed God doing a church plan, but then you had to trust God with the finances. How do we grow the church? What direction are we going to be? What's our vision? What's our mission? What's our core values? What type of team people do we want to bring on? Like it's very relevant to the business world.
It is. There's a lot of parallels and similarities for sure. I mean, many of the same challenges, finances, leadership, the people issues, all that stuff is very similar. I think really one of the only real differences is on the mission, right? Like a nonprofit, a church has a different mission than a business might have, but a lot of the leadership challenges are the same, and the
It
entrepreneurial challenges, yeah.
You said it well, leadership challenges, which is working with people. Like in business or in ministry, it's working with people. And if you don't have your people skills well established or learning and growing, it's going to be a hard road forward because whether it's customers, clients, or employees, you've got to learn how to work with people and
Well,
how to
in the
deal
church
with conflict.
context, volunteers, right? So you're trying to advance this mission, and especially in a church plant, you're mostly or all volunteers. So you're trying to inspire people to move forward, and you can't pay them a dime. It's just about it's a different sort of animal.
It's true. I was just thinking when you said you talked about going through the valleys of the hard 20-year wilderness season, and then we get to the peak, or we get to a breakthrough season, a flourishing. I hear a lot of people say those things, and I'll be a listener to a conversation like that. I'm like, yeah, that's so true. And then they just go on, like God's going to break through. I'm like, that's great. What do I do now? And so I know we're going to go after something else, but just because I like practical application, I like to be able to help. Like, what do I do if you're in that wilderness season? What do you do in the midst of it? Because it's great that you're now in the breakthrough. I feel like even in my personally right now, I've got crazy, incredible things happening, incredible stories, which we talk about all the time. Some of the most crazy testimonies in KB from the clients we work with, opportunities, financial provision, pressing through, seeing God do stuff, which is awesome. But yeah, you're also in this place of the before, the in between. It's not yet. Like there's so many things we're pressing in. Like, God, if you don't come through, we're in trouble. Tension in that process. But I've also been in those places that you're talking about where it's not so much so many great things are happening. Yes, there are some good things, but it's just like this wilderness time. Just real quickly, like what are some things that were pivotal for you in that journey that many are listening that are just like, I'm in that place. I'm in that desert place. I don't know who I'm called to be. I don't know where I'm called to go. I might be running a business. I might be just listening and trying to figure out life. What were some things that you took away that was really key for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that is so many times we're trying to build something. We're trying to build a church. We're trying to build the kingdom. We're trying to build a business. And God is trying to build the man or the woman. And I learned that the hard way. Like for many years, I didn't focus on the inner work that he was trying to do. John Eldridge said something really key. I heard him on a podcast recently, and he talked, especially for young leaders, but not just for young leaders, that how did he say it? He said the pace of your life in leadership can overshadow the work you do on the inner, because we can justify not doing the work because we're so busy, right? And I hate, I don't say that anymore. Like I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy. If you ask someone 9 times out of 10, I'm busy, that's what they'll say. And it's true, but is that what I want to be true about my life? And so I think what happened for me was, man, God just had to do a lot of inner work. I went into past planting this church thinking that I was not an insecure leader. And every insecurity, and I think it's the same with starting anything, every insecurity you can imagine, God was so faithful to just bring it to the surface, even though it was painful to say, no, we need to deal with this before you step into some of the things I've invited you into. And so I think looking back, if I were to do it differently, I would put more emphasis on the inner work. And what I mean by that is things like doing some counseling, leaning more into my mentors. I was always pretty transparent with them, but I'd get busy like everybody else, and it'd be a long time before I talked to someone who could really kind of pull things out of me and challenge me. And so, yeah, just like a question that always served me well was when I was so confused and disoriented in the midst of leadership was this: God, what are you doing on the inside? What are you doing right in here? And I might not understand all the stuff, all the circumstances happening outside of me, but when I would ask him that question, it was like, I'm glad you asked, Kent. Here's what I'm up to.
So good.
So that really helped me.
Yeah, I feel like you hit something really significant because I was the same way. Like I'm trying to build something. I got mission, I got prophetic words, I've got a mandate in my life, and I want to steward well what God's given to me. I got to make money for my family, all these different tensions in the place. And so I'm just like, let's go, let's go, let's go. I remember getting a prophetic word back before I moved out here, 16 years ago, and it was from Phil McNeil, who and he said he had this word over my life. He goes, Tim, I see you as like a racehorse, and you're in the starting gate, and you're ready to go, and you're ready to go conquer the world and run all over the place. And I'm like, yes, good. Here we go. Here we go. And he goes, but God's saying, you're not ready yet. I'm going to pull you back out. And when it's ready, it's time you'll run all over the place. But I ignored that part of the word of like, you're not ready yet. You need to be pulled back out. I'm like, good. I'm going to be unlocked and I get to run all over the world. But it was, fast forward like 8 years later, I remember the Lord highlighting that word to me. He goes, Tim, if I would have let you out in the midst of like the starting gate, you would have kicked me off halfway through the race.
Yes.
I had to take you back and re-break you and train you to the point that no matter if we ride in the hills without a saddle or we ride on a racetrack, we're staying in rhythm and connection. And it was about this internal work. It is about the breaking of mentalities and mindsets. I think you're so right. Like, I wish I would have recognized there's more about him developing me in the process that I could lean in and not be so anxious to get to the thing I'm called to do.
Yes.
And even with, I know there's real tensions of paying bills and making decisions and fulfilling what we're supposed to do. But when we can recognize what God is doing in the seasons of those things, oh, there you are, God. I see those things, and I have these promises or these things that God's already spoken. I can trust you're going to do it. So what are you doing right now? What are you doing in me? What am I supposed to be focusing on right now?
Yes.
Even if it's the day, it says a lamp unto my feet and a light into my path. Sometimes it's just a lamp unto my feet, one step at a time.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, well, all I know to do is read my Bible and show up as a good husband, love my family really well, and try to do this job. And it's like, that doesn't feel fulfilling, but
Right.
it's like he's doing something deeper. So I think you hit it so well. Did you find anything that you like was really keys for you to stay like filled with hope in the midst of those times?
I mean, honestly, my wife helped me a lot during
That's
those
rough.
times just to have someone that obviously that you can bare your heart to and can call you back to the person that God made you to be. So that was key for me, along with, not everybody has a spouse, so but along with just brothers in arms that, know you so well that can say, "Kent, you're not being you right now. You're not being who God made you to be." And encourage you. And like Jonathan and David, like Jonathan strengthened his hand in the
Yeah,
Lord.
that's good.
So I think relationships with mentors as well. Some of my mentors, the church that I came from in Canandaigua, New York, and I still call Chris Wood my pastor today. Him and his wife Joan had been just faithful through 2 decades of just being there for us. I remember one time we had just moved to Cambridge. Our rent moving from Rochester area to Cambridge quadrupled, and we were about to sign the lease, and it was actually more than 4 times as much. And I called Pastor Chris and Joan on the phone. Gina was with us. Our kids are in the back seat. They're just little. They're like 3 and 5. And I'm like, I don't know if I can sign this lease. And they just talked us through it. They're like, Kent, you've seen God do this. But we believe God's called you into this season. They just walked us through God's faithfulness. And I was able to grab the pen and sign. And God was faithful in that season to keep us here in a place that was so different than where we came from.
I think that's key, and we'll move on here. But I just feel like there's so many people that are in that place of just waiting and stuck, or feel, I'm not, whether they're running the business, they feel like they're just kind of in the mundane journey of life and not seeing things that they knew they were promised to step into. But, having people around you to remind you of truth and to remind you that God's got this and to remind you of what he said is like fuel to the fire. It's like, okay, I can keep going. I can keep going. I don't have to be discouraged in the midst of what looks like. And I mean, God spoke to Joshua to be strong, courageous. Don't forget, meditate on these things because you're about to go in and face some battles. And I think we ignore that part of our journey of like, you're going to face some battles, not and challenges and delays and seasons of breaking because God's doing something in you. We're like ready for the conquering promised land. Let's go, flourishing, beach time, millions of dollars or whatever it is. But it's a work, it's a process. And so I think it just those things are really good. One last thing I'll say about you, and we can move on. The thing I watched you do consistently though is you get the rhythms that you are consistent in. You get disciplines that you do on a regular basis, which by the way, I encourage you check out his books, check out his website on this because Kent's done a phenomenal job of just staying consistent. I'm going to keep to the rhythms of what I need to do to stay connected, to be disciplined in these areas of spirituality or personal development, or even when I don't feel like writing, I'm going to write because I know I'm called to write, and all these different things that you just created, these rhythms and these this disciplines that kept you consistently doing the things even though they didn't feel motivating, encouraging. It would seem like it was leading to anything, and you would consistently do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of life, honestly, if you think about, Psalm 23 talks about the valley. If you think about the mountain and the valley, most of our life, way more is spent in the valley or climbing the mountain than it is at the mountaintop. And so it's learning how to live in those seemingly mundane places. I think John Mark Comer called it, he said, like, finding the goodness of God in your actual daily life. That's been a lot about what my midlife journey's been about, like, okay, this is what life is. I can either, like, always be striving for something different or something else, or I can focus on God, His presence, where He is, His goodness, and just my everyday decisions, and it's those everyday decisions that at over 20 years lead to they compound, and after 20 years of doing these seemingly small things, you begin to see compound interest happen.
That is huge, and I could just feel, not to over spiritualize something, but I feel like that's significant for many people is what you're sowing today is going to be what you reap tomorrow. And so in the season of the delays, the wandering, the waiting, is like this is the compound interest. I'm adding, investing into my next season, into the future. And what you do today, it's just like a farmer, I gotta I gotta sow, otherwise I'm not gonna reap. And if I even though you're not gonna reap for 6 months or whatever it is, I mean, I drive down the road and see these guys that do these huge orchards, whether orange or cherry trees or whatever they are. Like they have these huge orchards and they're just beginning with these small little trees. I'm like, they have a 100-year plan. Like they're building this for the next 20. Because you drive other ones and I'm like, that tree's been there for 50 years. Those trees have been there. I'm like, man, they really are intentional of thinking, I've got to do the work now to reap the harvest later on. And I feel like we live so short sighted in our journeys because we want relief of the pain.
Yes,
We want a purpose, we want direction, we want to get out of the place we're at. And it's hard to remember those things. But what you just said, I do believe too, is kingdom. It's like a compound interest thing. What God has spoken, He watches over His word to perform it. And when there's delays, it is like a compound interest. But what we sow into it, what we prepare, what we choose to believe in the midst of it, is key. Otherwise, we're just going to be sitting on the sideline when it's ready. It's like the women, the virgins with the lamp oils. Is like they got sleepy and drowsy. It says, and they weren't prepared. They weren't ready in the midst of it. And I feel like that's been a word the Lord's been speaking to me a lot, Kent, is that we need to keep our swords sharp,
yes,
even in the midst of the unknowns and the discouragement. And we all have those moments of frustration. And that's why we go to people or we pray and we just get time with God. But don't let your swords get dull.
that's right. Yeah,
So for the next thing that you're called to do, keep pounding the pavement, keep up, I mean, whatever it is, whatever the thing is that you are supposed to be a writer, write. Just practice it, even if you're not writing a book. If if you're a songwriter, write songs, even if nothing's happening. If you're caught, whatever it might be, as far as even a business is like, I know I'm called to lead a major business. Focus on how to develop your people, even if it's two people right now. And how do I steward my finances really well with the little I have? All those things I think are very significant for the next seasons people are stepping into.
yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, especially the fruit tree analogy. Well, one, because abiding is like the theme of my life, and so if you think about it, we get our role confused. Our role is not fruitfulness, our role is faithfulness. And here's what I mean by that.
Mm.
John 15, my life passage, verse 5 says, I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him will bear much fruit, for apart from me, you can do nothing. So our job is not to, the fruit job is God's part. Our job is to cultivate the tree, the soil. We're a branch. We're to remain connected to the vine in that scenario. But if we'll just focus on, and God is not into putting more on us than we can bear. Sometimes, I mean, he'll stretch us for sure, but he's not trying to just constantly load us with weight. Usually it's simple. If we'll go back to like, God, what are you asking of me right now?
That's right.
I just want you to do this.
Yep.
But we get so invested and involved in trying to it's like we're yelling at the fruit tree, telling it to grow. And not the only thing that will make the fruit come is us staying connected to the source of life. That's it. That's where fruit comes from, is
Yep.
us staying connected.
Which let me correlate that to business leaders because many people hear that said, "That's great, but I got to run a business." But the reality is, apart from me, you can do nothing. And we look at that scripture meaning that, okay, well, I can't go heal the sick and raise the dead, cast out demons. No, it means life. It means actually having fruitfulness in everything we're doing, seeing the growth, the increase, the favor of God in our business as well, in our family, in our relationships, in our finances, and our business. And I think so many business leaders disconnect that. They're like, okay, yeah, for my personal time, yeah, I got to abide, but I got to do the business. I got to get business done. I got to make these decisions. I got to hire. I got to fire. I got to market. I got it. But you're absolutely right. It comes back to we bear fruit even in our business. Yes, can you do it by striving and pushing? But it's very limited fruit. It's bad fruit. It's like it doesn't have good sweet tasting fruit, if you want to put it that way. But it's that abiding. I got to stay connected to Him because out of Him I have peace, I have clarity, I have truth, I have wisdom to know what to do in the situations. I'm not functioning in my business meeting or my marketing meeting or that meeting with a client out of stress and anxiety and frustration. I'm doing it out of love, out of a connection versus reaction. And
Yeah,
so that abiding is a huge element that we disconnect, I think, in the business world because it's like, yeah, for my personal time, I need to do my devotional. But then when I go to day to day stuff, we just disconnect. Like, I just got to do what I got to know to do. And we don't actually lean back on, I can't do this without you, God. I can't, if I do, it's going to be short lived.
that's right.
If I do, it's going to be based upon me making it happen. And it's
Yes.
not going to bear the long lasting fruit.
And you're going to damage yourself and people you love in the process.
Yes. Yep.
Your team, the people, your family, yourself.
Yeah. In fact, many people I think are listening or watching this, and you feel you can you're getting you're reactive in your conversations. You know you're stressed out, or you're showing up a little bit more on edge, and it's because you're not abiding. It's not because you're not taking that time to reconnect, even if it's 15 minutes. You're reconnecting, inviting him in, and just saying, "I got to stay connected. Otherwise, I'm not going to bear anything. I'm just going to be forcing something out that's not fun in that
Well,
process."
let me give you a practical how that looked in church planting leadership. So we came to a point, this was maybe 8 years in, where we had a major transition. Lots of people left for graduating college, some people transitions in life, some left because they were disgruntled, church life, right? And our finances were just on a steady downward descent. Well, we got to a place where I could see where they were going, and it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks out from like, we're going to have to close the doors if something doesn't happen. And I went back to the Lord. By this time, I'd learned, like, no, the answer is not for me to start running and doing 1,000 things trying to solve this. So I went to the Lord. I said, God, what do we do about this? How do I handle this? And he spoke to me from the book of Genesis, where he said to Moses, when they were at the Red Sea, he said, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Now, was to me in that season. It's not a blanket for everybody to do this same
Not a
thing.
formula. It was the word of the Lord for you in that moment.
And
Yep.
so what I did is I did nothing in the way of trying to do anything with our finances. Every time that came up, every time the temptation to worry, to fear, I'd sit down in the chair in my office and I'd say, I'm going to stand still and see your salvation, God. So fast forward, it's 2 days out now from us going bankrupt. A guy calls me. He wants to get together. He's a guy from our church wants to get together for coffee. So we go and he says, I've got bad news and good news. Let me give you the good news first. Keep in mind, we're about $1,000 in our account now for a church. He says, "The good news is we're gonna give the church a $75,000 gift. The bad
Wow.
news is we're leaving the church, but it's not because we're disgruntled. Our daughter just needs, like, some teenage activity, and it was you guys are more young adults here, and so it's, that it's just a reality," and I was fine with that, obviously.
You give me the 75, I'm good. No, I'm just kidding.
But no, wonderful guy and family. So, but that's what that happened right at that moment.
Wow.
God does wait till often the midnight hour, much to our dismay. But, that's an example of like, there was many times I didn't do it that way and I ran and tried to do a million things and it led nowhere. That was once I had learned the lesson the hard way.
It's true. I'll also say too, because I know that the flip side of that is sometimes I trust God all the way to the end, and then it doesn't happen. And then I get disappointed and discouraged because, well, God, you didn't show up the way you wanted to. But I cannot allow my theology or my belief system to change because of what I experienced. I have to then, even if I didn't get the $75,000 in that moment, and say, okay, God, no matter what, you're still faithful, you're still true, you're still the provider. Okay, now what do I do with this situation right now? How do I pivot this? Because in the valley, He's with me.
Yes.
So if you went into that place like, okay, I guess we're gonna have to do bankrupt, and the Lord's like, that's where you're leaning in. I think people disconnect when they didn't see the breakthrough they thought, like, well, got to figure it out now. Well, it's past the time. Now I have to do it. And they disconnect instead of like you just said, okay, I'm gonna stand still. Okay, Lord, what is my battle plan right now? What do I do when I don't have the sales that I need for payroll tomorrow?
That's right.
And it might be, hey, reach out to this person. It might be, okay, borrow 5,000 to get you through that process. Not just assuming, because I think here's the problem that we do. We start to reason and assume, justify what we do in the natural because, well, we got to make a decision. I was just in that place just recently and I came back to my wife and I'm like, we've got to do it. We don't have an option. She goes, since when do we make decisions outside of peace? When do
Hmm.
we make decisions because we have to?
Hmm.
And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, you're right. Sorry. Yeah, I forgot about that." And it was that we had to get back to peace and not make the decision out of reaction of disappointment or things not happening, but out of, "Okay, Lord, we're not gonna do it because we have to." It's kinda like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. "Lord, even if you don't come through, we're not gonna bow.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm not gonna bow, so now what do we do right now?"
that's right.
And I think
Yeah.
it's both and, because people experience both sides.
I agree, and just to be clear for all the listeners is that huge 75,000 breakthrough came after many years of groceries at the doorstep breakthrough, $50 breakthroughs, $100, $1,000, 5,000. It was a progressive thing that God was doing, in our lives to trust Him to
Yep.
move in those ways.
That's really good. So don't dismiss the small breakthroughs, the small gifts, thinking like God didn't come through. I think it's so valuable to recognize those things because it's not only building faith, but it's reassuring. And I believe your belief and your yes in those moments are planting seeds for that breakthrough. So it's recognizing where is He doing things. Over and over, Israel has said that they fail. They 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 face major consequences because they forgot what God did. They forgot how He just provided, what He did in that process, and so then they grumbled, they complained, they disconnected, and I think that's where we, as business leaders, as leaders in general in life, people in life, we disconnect, we grumble, we forget, but those momentary things, I think finding God in those $5 things or groceries at the door is like, "Oh, God, you came through. God, you did it. Even it wasn't to the extent that I wanted it, you came through."
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good.
Can I share something to how that narrative shifted? Because I feel like this is important to the story. So, the first 3 years of that church plant were hell. I mean, it in so many ways, financially included. I remember calling my landlord one month and being able to say, "We can't pay the rent this month," and, so things like that had happened, not a lot, but occasionally. But we had struggled with a missionary mindset, poverty mentality, all these things. And after like several years, God gave me a series of prophetic dreams. I won't go into all of them about, how He wanted to defeat this sort of poverty mentality in me. And eventually I came to the point where I had to shift the narrative. And here's what I mean. Every time a financial challenge or lack came up, I switched my default narrative by memorizing one single verse, and it was 2 Corinthians 9:8, and I would put our name in it, and I would say it like this. I would say, "God, thank you that all grace is abounding to the Murawskis, who having all things at all times have a sufficiency for every good work." have more than enough for every good work. And every time that challenge came up, no, God, you've made all grace abound to the Murawskis, who having all things at all times and all sufficiency have an abundance for every good work. We underestimate the power of one single verse. It's about this. We have to renew our minds. And it doesn't take memorizing a whole book. It takes getting one promise in your heart. And that, see, I'm a little bit of a science geek too. So it's called neuroplasticity. Now we know kind of how this works. Your brain, as you think a thought over and over, tramples down a pathway. It's plastic, so to speak. It's moldable, even when you're an adult. And so, whatever thought first comes to mind when you think of a challenge, that is the pathway that's trampled down. The good news is it can be changed. God already alerted us to this in Romans 12 when he said, renewed, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. How do you do that? You have to have a new thought that's truth, and you have to reform that pathway in your brain until that becomes the default narrative, until his truth becomes the default narrative in your challenge.
That's so good, Ken. I think that's such a practical application that we have to first of all renew our mind, but also what is getting the word of God inside of us, of his truth. Because I mean, a lot of our a lack of a breakthrough or experiencing what God has is because of our belief system. Because whatever we agree with, we empower. I mean, if I'm going to agree with fear, anxiety, pressure, it doesn't mean that's the only access point for God to break through. But we blame God for things not happening when we're the ones not choosing to partner with him into the process as well. And so I think that's such a great truth in that process. I want to flip. I want to jump into the topic that we're talking about. One of the things that you've been seeing quite often in your executive coaching, working with CEOs and business leaders, so often is this transition that is happening from functioning. A common phrase we hear is in your business, not on your business, or a manager to a leader, or leading your company. I'd love you to unpack it because I feel like a lot of business owners, in fact, I've heard this phrase too, is that you don't really have a business if the business is dependent upon you. You just have a job. And so you're just working for pay instead of that. And I think a lot of people need to shift their mentality or even responsibilities and roles into that place, but they feel stuck. They're like, I have to, I need to, I'm supposed to. I want to just unpack this a little bit of just what you've been seeing. What are some keys to do that? And what's the challenge? What's the problem? And then what are some practical ways to reassess or refocus, change the way you think and step out of those roles to be able to step into a different perspective of vision and direction.
Yeah. Yeah, no, some people have like a debate over whether this manager leader thing exists. So I'm not interested in that facet of it as much as, so I want to say it this way: a manager can be a good leader. So I'm more talking about that. I'm not making a differentiation in physical roles as much as I'm saying there's a mindset or mentality to moving from managing to leading. So, Peter Drucker, he's like, referred to as the father of modern management. He said this, and I really like it. He said, management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. And so Drucker saw management as about systems and structures and maintaining order, which is important. But he said leadership is about vision, integrity, inspiring people to reach higher standards and do meaningful work. So there's a difference in what that is. So one of the big mindsets I think that holds people back, and this is just something I haven't really developed a lot of this stuff. It's just more something that's been kind of stewing in the background, is a lot of people in manager mode have a confusion about their role. And so what I mean by that is it's actually like, especially if you're a new leader or a new executive or a new business owner, it's like, what does a leader actually do? What am I supposed to be doing? Back to Drucker's example, what are the right things that I'm supposed to be doing? And so they have a lack of clarity. And I really like what Scott Ritzheimer said. He's like a leadership coach. He's helped started over 20,000 businesses over a few decades, like just coaching people. And he says that a CEO or a key leader has three responsibilities. Number one, cast a compelling vision for your team. Number two, turn that vision into clarity so your team can execute. And number three, secure the resources necessary so that they can fulfill that vision. So a lot of people going from manager to leader, you have to get clear on your role. If you can't cast a compelling vision, if you can't make that simple and turn it into clarity, if you can't find the resources to help make it a reality, you're doing the wrong things.
That's good. So let me just ask this question though. So you got a guy that's running a company, maybe he's got 5 employees, he's doing a lot of the services. He's kind of managing the company. He's in there. But it's like, how do you actually step out I mean, you started talking about some mentality, but and doing the right things. So how do I step out from running my company of all the things that have to get done to begin to shift my perspective to a different approach and responsibilities?
Yeah. Well, like when you're starting things, there is that reality that you wear a lot of hats. So if you're in a startup, if you're in entrepreneurial mode, that first 3 to 5 years, you're doing a lot of that stuff and you're going to be doing more. You're going to be doing a lot of things that you don't necessarily want to be doing. Over time, if you're not stepping out of those, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Like, so how do we do that? I think one of the things that we need to be doing is understand how we're wired. We need to clearly understand our strengths. And I want to be clear about what I mean by that. When I say strength, I mean a thing that we're innately gifted at or good at that also brings us joy and energy. Because over time, if you stay in that mode too long of wearing all the hats and doing all the things, and you're spending the bulk of your time doing things that don't energize you, you're gonna feel like a slave. You're gonna say, this is a job. I got in this to do something else, to have freedom, to have purpose, to have meaning, to help people, and I'm just a slave to all these things I don't want to be doing. Right. So I like Gay Hendricks. He's the author of a book called The Big Leap, and he calls this your zone of genius. So he kind of breaks it up into four categories. He says there's a zone of incompetence. If you picture like a grid, like with four parts, there's a zone of incompetence. That's where you're doing something you don't understand or aren't skilled at. There's a zone of competence. That's where you're doing what you're efficient at, but you recognize a lot of people could be doing this. Like, this isn't something that only I can do. There's a zone of excellence, and this is actually the dangerous one. The zone of excellence is when you do something you're tremendously skilled at, and often it brings in money, but you don't love it. You like it, but you don't love it. And if you get too involved in too much of that, it will keep you from entering what he calls your zone of genius, which is your natural abilities, which are innate rather than learned. And he calls it, this isn't unique to him. Other people have talked about the theory of flow, but flow is when your challenge meets your strength. So it's that place where you can get lost in the work and you can look up and say, I can't believe I've been doing this for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And he advocates that eventually you want to get to spending 70% of your time in your zone of genius, which is hard to do, but we've got to continue to cut, work towards that. Our weaknesses, hire for your weaknesses. That would probably be a practical step in that journey as a CEO, as a leader, is your first hire should be probably someone to take stuff off your plate, maybe an office administrator, an assistant, that type of person.
Yeah, I've found in my, last 15 year or 10, 12 years of coaching, consulting, one of the for small companies, one of the hardest hires for them to first do is an admin because they're like, I don't know if I can trust them. I don't know if they can do what I need to do. And so hiring somebody like that is hard because it's like, is it worth it? And you start to recognize, like you said, just some practical things that you start gain back 10 hours of your time. What is that worth? If you can gain back 5 hours of your time in the week, what is that worth? And if your hourly rate is worth $100 or $50, and you're paying somebody $20, you just made money, in that process because you can be able to do it. But I think the trust aspect and recognizing you're never going to get to that flow space if you keep doing the same thing, all of the things that other people can do for you. And so I think it's a mentality shift and permission that it's going to actually add value and to help you. But I want to stop because you just walked this through with a client that we had where he was just going, going, going. And one of the biggest things he had to do is kind of reset his whole schedule. Talk to me about that a little bit, because that's a key component of actually being able to see the bigger picture
Yeah.
versus just being stuck in the weeds.
Yeah, I mean, there are some similarities and some differences with that one. So this person was, had been running a company for a while, educational company, and he had been for the last 5 years working 12 to 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, some of that was COVID related, but not all of it because it was happening before that and after that. So what I like to often say is, here's how you know if it's here's how you know if it's a busy season or a lifestyle. A season has a beginning and end, right? A lifestyle does not. So if you find yourself saying, I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy, and you don't have a beginning and end to that, it's not a season, it's a lifestyle. So this had become a lifestyle. This was an alignment issue, I think, in big part. So what happened was I said, "When's the last time you've taken a day of rest?" Like, I'm big on Sabbath, and so I just said, "When have you taken a day of rest?" He said, "I don't remember the last time." He said, "I can't. I've got too much to do. If I take a day off, I will be so swamped when I get back that I'll just be buried. I can't do it." I said, "Okay, let's back up for a minute. The Jewish folks believe the day starts in the evening. So what if you just went in the evening, say like at a 5 p.m., 6 p.m. on a Friday, and even if you did till noon the next day and then jumped into work?" He said, "Actually, if I look at it that way, I think I could go from 6 to 6. And then as long as I can do some work the next evening, that will help me. I think I can do that." He did it, and within 2 to 3 months, it was a mentality shift, a heart shift, an alignment issue. He went from working 12 to 15 hours a day to working 2 to 4 hours a day on the business. Now,
Wow.
that wasn't the only thing that
Sure.
influenced that. Some of it was seasonal, but it was a huge part of it. It was an alignment with the kingdom of God and practicing God's principles in our business. And he's happy, he's content, he's doing things he never did before. He's taking regular days off. He's looking at, planning a longer vacation for the first time in a long time. Uh,
Wow.
so
Well, I
yeah,
asked you to bring it up because I felt like, that's a key component to actually shift the mentality because we can say, okay, I know I'm supposed to do this. I know I should be in these levels. I need to hand this off. I need to hand, but we're so consumed with all the work that we're doing that we can't even think clearly and function in a place of like thoroughly thinking through what I need to hand off. So I think a number of people are in that place where I'm just consumed with busyness and
yes,
I need to. I love that aspect. Is it lifestyle or season? And if you're constantly seeing yourself in this reciprocal cycle of things, like you're just find yourself in the same cycle, every so often, over and over, it's probably more of a lifestyle than it is just a season because you find yourself doing the same thing. But also implementing that rest what goes back to abiding, which we talked about, that rest, that connection that then can bring clarity to recognize I don't need to do all those things. Oh, I can actually hand these things off. I don't have to do this because you're feeling the pressure of exhaustion and busyness. I have to, I need to, I'm supposed to. And that reset, that recalibration, that recharge allows us to see clearer, think clearer,
yeah.
and make better decisions. So I think that's spot on.
All the things he thought he needed to do somehow, almost magically disappeared when he aligned himself with how God was saying to do his not only his business, but his life. I think it was just a clarity that came that suddenly he realized, I don't need to be on demand all the time. I don't need to be doing this, and this. I don't need to be doing what the workers in the office that I've hired should be doing. I need to hire someone to do this particular. It was like this clarity that just kind of came over.
Yeah, I think a lot of times too, we have these lies that we're believing that we begin to agree with. Remember, we say this a lot of times here, which whatever you agree with, you empower. And so if I believe a lie, I empower the liar. So if I believe the lie that I'm the one that's responsible, I need to be the one that does this, we're then empowering that. And then we have to fulfill, we're self fulfilling it. And we're putting the stress and pressure on ourselves. We're also allowing the enemy to put that responsible and
Yeah.
pressure. You have to, don't let people down. Don't let people down and like, that's right, I need to. And we live out of this thing. We don't even realize it's happening. I remember doing Whole 30 is like a diet type thing. And the whole thing is you get rid of all the stuff, the food, you only eat these basic things for 30 days. And then you start to slowly integrate it back into your life. And you start to realize, oh, I was eating pasta all the time. I didn't know it made me feel this way.
Hmm.
Well, I didn't know that made me sluggish. I didn't know because when you detox yourself from it and then you bring it back in, you realize how it affects it. But so many people are living in this sluggish mentality, this busyness, this hustle. They don't even realize what's happening because they're so stuck in that routine. So I think that pull out, that reset, that Sabbath rest is so connected to obviously the abiding, but to get the clarity and how to move from managing to actually leading and focusing on what am I supposed to be doing, not what I have to do.
You know what part of it is too, Tim? And I think this particular client really figured this out because this is what shifted the game for him when we talked about Sabbath. Part of the problem is we think we're indispensable. In other words, it's not going to go forward without us. And when I said a comment off the cuff to him about Sabbath when we were talking about it, and it was this: while we rest, God works.
Mm.
And I think he suddenly realized, like, oh, if God can, who's holding the universe together, can take a day of rest, and he gave us that example, probably not for him, but more for us, but also to enjoy what he just created. If he can do that, I'm pretty sure that I can do that as well.
That's really good. You know, there's a verse that goes along to back your thought process up, which is Isaiah 60. I think it's 64, verse 3 says that God is actively working on behalf of those who wait upon the Lord. That he's actually working on our behalf as we rest. There's more things happening in the midst of it, and that's not obviously an excuse to be lazy, but I think there's a good challenge as people are just listening right now. Of first of all, what are some lies that you're believing that is keeping you in this busyness? This I need to. I love to use the word. People ask me how you doing. I'm like, life is full. Life is full. That's because it's my choice of what I'm choosing to do versus busy, busy, busy. But you might be overwhelmed. You might feeling like I can't, I have to. So stop. What are the lies I'm believing? Now you might not even be able to hear until you get yourself a Sabbath. You know, stop and think, when can I put a break in for me to be able to pull back out, reconnect and just listen into the midst of it. And then out of that place, then asking okay, what are the things that I can let go of? What are the lies that I'm believing that saying I can't let go of those things, and just repenting and breaking agreements with that, but then saying, okay, God, what's your strategy? What's your plan? Who can I give this over to? And you begin to process with God of the execution of the shift from I have to be in it. I have to do these things to what are the things that I can't hand off? Who are those people? And some people are stuck like, I don't have the right people. I can't hire the right people. It's a mindset. It's a belief system again. Partner with God. You did this earlier, the verse of out of Corinthians, all grace will abound in Corinthians, right? All
Yeah,
grace will
Second
abound.
Corinthians 9:8.
Yeah, 2 Corinthians 9:8. And it's like, okay, what's the truth? What's the truth about me hiring people? Lord, I thank you that you make our company attractive, that we hire the right people. I'm declaring and agreeing with the truth of God's favor over our lives in the process. And so there's a partnering with the practicalities in the midst of it versus I don't know, I'm gonna market and get the right people. I gotta hustle again. You're doing the same thing. So go back to, okay, God, how do I partner with you and agree that as I go and do what you invited me to do, I'm going to also declare the truth to keep my mind being reminded. That's right. We hire the right people. We hire people that are good for us, that are excellent at what they do, and they're able to be efficient at those things, so
Yes.
forth.
Well, and at times I think it boils down to it's an obedience issue, right? Because think about it, many times obedience has an if to it. So if you do this, God will do this. Not always. Sometimes he's benevolent, so he just does it. But in the case of Sabbath, say, or any other issue that's an obedience issue, he's not going to give the provision or the wisdom or the clarity until after we obey. So you're saying, I can't afford to do this. I can't afford to do that. I can't take a day of rest. I can't, whatever he told you to do. And the reality is, God's saying, I'm ready to act. All you need to do is obey.
That's really good. All you need to do is obey. I think that's a good mark to kind of wrap this up, because I think that so many of that are listening are in that place. There's a lot of homework you just got through this podcast, but I think it's even challenging for all of us. Even if you feel like you're in a good spot, if you're not keeping the rhythms of rest, if you're not keeping the rhythms of connection and just like ongoing checkpoints, like the check in, how am I doing internally? What do I need? God, what are you doing in this season of my life? Even as we talked in the beginning, all the way through to, am I stay keeping the habits that I need to stay healthy? I mean, you have some great books and resources on just healthy rhythms of rest, how to not burn out, how to make sure that you're thriving, not just surviving. But in that process too, which I encourage you, go check out Kent's stuff. But also, it's that place of inviting God into the process.
Yes.
But it's hard to invite God if we're just busy, 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 going, going, going. You know, I find a lot of people are pushing hard to get to the momentum of growth. Like, I just need, if I get to this point, then we'll be cruising. But then when everything happens, now they're so busy keeping up with it, they neglect all the different aspects of like the state keeping the rhythm. So I think it's so important as people are listening, just the rhythms of rest, of getting back to the Sabbaths, getting back to partnering God. What am I supposed to be doing? What am I not supposed to be doing? What can I hand off? What am I supposed to keep doing? What is your vision? And what do I need to believe for to help have the alignment and the right people to do what they need to do in that process?
Yeah, I'll leave people with this. I think if we'll learn to fall in love with the process rather than the promise, that will serve us well. And when I say that, what I mean is what God's doing in our lives in the moment, in the present, and also the work that he's given us to do right here. See, to our mutual friend Josh Finley says it this way. He says, learn to look ahead, but not live ahead. And leaders often were visionaries. So we spend so much time on the future, on the promise. And what we do is we short circuit ourselves in in the present because we're always looking ahead and we're never quite there. So we have to focus on the present and measure backward, which means focus on where you've come from, not where you're going. Keep it in mind, but don't live there.
That's so good. Well, Kent, thank you so much. Such a rich depth not just information, but revelation and application here today, because you've lived it out. That's the key. Like you've lived this out in such a way. So, those that are listening, just want to encourage you to continue to follow us on our social medias. You can go to Instagram or TikTok or LinkedIn, our YouTube as well. But I just want to encourage you: don't disconnect. Continue to lean in because God's got so much for you, insight, wisdom, as well as invitation to rest and connect. So thank you, Kent. Appreciate you. Have a great day.
Tim, thanks for inviting me. And I just wanted to say I appreciate and be thankful for your work, not only in my life, but in the life of so many leaders of bringing prophetic encouragement to people. I know it's been at times like an oasis in the desert for me, just you using the gift that God's called you to do and bringing this podcast and what you do with Kingdom Business to the world. So thank you.
Thanks, Kent. Appreciate it.